Market at day's high as hopes emerge of a takeover of the beleaguered SVB in the US. Healthcare as well as metals gain, while utilities and realty drag.
Lupin goes through US FDA pharma co-vigilance inspection with no observations. Sun Pharma buys into an animal health business, but also reports challenges due to a ransomware attack. Zydus Life and Alembic Pharma to report US FDA inspection outcomes.
Crompton Greaves Consumer Electricals announces a merger with recently acquired Butterfly Gandhimati with a swap valuation that favors the parent company. The Butterfly Gandhimati stock slips in trade.
Saurabh Srivastava, chairman of Indian Angel Network, tells CNBC-TV18 that angel tax is a blunt instrument to curb money laundering, and its imposition can impact the startup sector that is 85% foreign funded.
Hello and welcome. You've tuned into Business Lunch. I'm Nisha Poddar, and with me as always is my co-anchor Pavitra Parekh. And Pavitra, yes, there is a shade of green, and at lunch hour probably the market is looking like it is really energetic at this point. But remember, it is a lot of global cues that our markets have been reacting to, and it's a very small range in which Nifty 50 has really moved around. So at the moment, closer to 0.5% gain, 78 points gain, and holding just above that 17,000 mark after opening the trade today for this week below the 17,000 mark. So it has ramped up its position by the middle of the trading session. When we talk about sensex, it is at 57,790 odd points. Bank Nifty is underperforming the key indices, just on the flat line with a positive bias, and mid caps also flattish in trade but negative. So the advanced decline ratio is heavily in favor of the declines, but big boy Reliance Industries is the one which is contributing a lot, up over 1.5% in trade, and some of the metals are also shining in trade today. But overall, market right now is looking in the green, close to 0.5% uptick, Pavitra.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, on the frontline index, it's looking quite all right. Like you said, Reliance is doing well. A bunch of the pharma names are doing really well. In fact, the last week itself, we saw the pharma index, which was the best sectoral performer. So today itself, that is also seeing a gain of over 1.5%. That one doing quite well. But you know what we saw last week was that the broader markets really underperformed what was going on with the frontline indices, right? And that's playing out once again. So again, you're seeing the mid cap and small cap index, which are not faring quite as well as what we're seeing on the frontline index. The Nifty real estate pack is seeing some cuts come through. It was down 4.5% last week, and today you're seeing big cuts in names like Oberoi, India Bulls Real, everything except for, other than, you know, Phoenix Mills, which is seeing a good move based on the brokerage note that came through. Other than that, everything's pretty weak. So that's a space that I would really watch out for. But other than that, there are definitely some sectors such as the pharma and IT space which are holding up. So that's what's going on for the market. Let's start the show now with an important banking story. In a setback for lenders, the Supreme Court has tweaked the RBI's master circular and said that banks cannot unilaterally declare frauds without a hearing. The top court added that the lenders must also hear borrowers before declaring any accounts fraud. So Ashmit joins us with all of the details on this story. Ashmit?
Well, a setback coming in for the RBI as well as to banks. At the heart of the issue is the 2016 circular of the RBI, which allowed banks to unilaterally declare accounts of willful defaulters as fraudulent. Now, this circular was challenged before the High Court and then before the Apex Court. The petitioners or the affected borrowers were essentially were arguing that this is an extreme measure and that this measure has extreme civil consequences in terms of these borrowers being able to access credit facilities, and that is something that should be borne in mind. Now, that argument appears to have struck a chord with the Apex Court, and the Supreme Court, in fact, also held that such action has not just civil but also penal consequences. It is tantamount to blacklisting of certain borrowers, that these borrowers will be unable to access institutional finance, and given the consequences here, the Apex Court has held that it is unfair for banks to be allowed a unilateral decision, that there necessarily needs to be a notice and a hearing granted to these affected borrowers. And not just that, the Supreme Court has gone a step further and said that any order that is passed declaring an account as fraud by the bank needs to be well reasoned. The reasons need to be listed out as to why a particular account is being declared as fraudulent. Now, these are the two amendments, the two tweaks that the Supreme Court has added to the RBI circular. The RBI is likely to be unhappy. They've been arguing long and hard through the High Court and the Apex Court that this based on very specific, definite criteria, and that this is an internal mechanism for the banks, and that this serves as an warning system of identifying certain red flags in certain accounts, and that this system does not. Hearing has to be given, and the order needs to be well reasoned. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Ashmit. That's a big unilateral such decisions by the lenders, and the hearing is mandatory in this particular. RBI has cleaned up banks, but not happy that over 90% of the bad loans are getting to CNBC-TV18 on the current banking crisis. And he says that his ideal banking system comprises of public sector's banks. Listen in.
I'm quite happy with the cleaning up of the RBI banks that Das and his company have done, Raghuram Rajan and Das, etc. I think I'm quite comfortable with the overall framework. See, I don't think in other countries the bankruptcy process results in realization of 5% of the value. Nah? I don't know the statistics, I've been out of touch. But if I were in the Reserve Bank, the first thing I will do is I'll collect information about the realization in all countries, or at least important countries, find out what is the realization and why. Are we below or are we above? That will give me a comfort in regard to the working of the legislation. Otherwise not. And how quickly we do that. How quickly and how much. Certainly not like 40% private, 50% public. It's a dangerous mix. In my view, there should be public sector banks, full public sector banks, and there should be private sector banks coexisting. Secondly, those public sector banks should concentrate on specific activities. The governance systems of the public sector banks ensure that you give reasonably good truth. For a regulator, knowing the truth on a continuous basis is one of the most important things. Secondly, I feel that there are special problems, special sections, and they should be, if necessary, whatever the commercial cost, the government should reimburse. But a good banking system, I believe, is one where at least 30% of the total banking system is entirely public sector.
All right, that is an exclusive conversation with YV Reddy, and we will keep bringing you clips of this through the day. But for now, let's also bring you some news from the primary markets. Iconic brand Cello may be looking at an IPO soon. Yash is here with all of the details. Yash, this is going to be an interesting one, and after a while.
Well, certainly, you know, it's been long since we've spoken about the primary market IPO action, and we're sort of restarting that, and what a company to start that with. Cello World. We've been given to understand that the company is looking to launch its IPO. According to our sources, the size is expected to be about 2,000 crore, which the company would look to raise through a mix of offer for sale, which means the existing shareholders would be selling partially some of their stake through this IPO, and there will be some fresh issue as well, which will come into the company, and according to our sources is expected to be used towards widening and strengthening their distribution network. As far as the process itself is concerned, the company started in engaging investment bankers. In fact, bankers like GM Financial, IIFL, ICICI Securities have already been appointed as far as taking forward the IPO process is concerned. Importantly, Cello World owns about 55% stake in one of the listed companies as well from the group itself. It's called Wimplast, which, as I said, is a listed entity. As far as the product categories for Cello World are concerned, there's a long list that we have here. They're present in home essential segments like drinkware, lunchboxes, cookware, dinnerware. They are also present in bathroom accessories, air purifiers, vegetable fruit washer, UV sanitizers, also in various elements of furniture segment. We have many listed companies which are sort of present in bits and pieces out of the various businesses where Cello World is present. But having all those businesses under one roof, it'll be an interesting IPO to watch out for.
Thanks so much, Yash, for giving us all those details. Cello is indeed a household name in certain categories, so it'll be interesting to see that large IPO come in. On that note, let's take a short break on the show for now. But up next, mass protests erupt in Israel over the Prime Minister's plans to overhaul the justice system. Updates after this very short break. Stay tuned.
इस बार टाटा आईपीएल जियो सिनेमा पे, किसी भी स्क्रीन पे, वो भी फ्री। चल भैया।
100% happiness with SBI Home Loans. Zero processing fee at 8.50% onwards. Apply today. Call 1800112018. Visit homeloans.sbi.
तेरी रोशनी हूं मैं, किस ना।
कविता, मैं अपनी इन्वेस्टमेंट लिमिट तक पहुंच गया हूं। काश कोई ऐसा इन्वेस्टमेंट प्लान होता जो मुझे एडिशनल टैक्स बेनिफिट देता।
रवि, बस इतनी सी बात, तुम एनपीएस पे क्यों नहीं इन्वेस्ट करती?
एनपीएस, इसमें इन्वेस्ट करने से क्या बेनिफिट है?
एनपीएस देता है 50,000 तक की इन्वेस्टमेंट पर एडिशनल टैक्स बेनिफिट, वो भी 1.5 लाख की लिमिट के ऊपर।
अरे वाह, अब तो मुझे भी इसमें इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए ना।
तो इंतजार किस बात का? आज ही एनपीएस ट्रस्ट की वेबसाइट पर जाओ और इन्वेस्ट करो।
पेंशन है तो टेंशन नहीं। एनपीएस इन्वेस्टमेंट्स आर सब्जेक्ट टू मार्केट रिस्क्स।
Helps beat sensitivity fast. Sensodyne Rapid Relief.
Meet the unsung achievers.
सोसाइटी के लिए एक बहुत छोटी छोटी बातें हैं, जैसे आप वो विक्टिम का सुन लीजिए, उसमें बिलीव कीजिए और छोटे छोटे चीज़ों में उसको हेल्प कीजिए। इससे भी उसका कॉन्फिडेंस बढ़ जाएगा और शी विल फील बिट रिलैक्स।
Who've turned their real life struggles into stories of grit and inspiration.
मैंने 1 साल में कम से कम पीटा का जो है मैंने 111 लड़कियों को बचाया है, उसमें 10 लड़कियां माइनर निकली है और बाहर के जो है टोटल 451 लड़कियों को मैंने रेस्क्यू किया है।
A mega initiative to make gender parity an attainable reality. HSBC presents CNBC-TV18 Future Female Forward, the Women's Collective.
Presented by HSBC.
Co-presented by HCL Tech.
Knowledge partner Deloitte. Industry partner Vicky. Associate partner Reliance Industries Limited.
Show me the sunset. You make me happy. We wanna go there. It's beautiful.
Magnite. Be celebrated with the big, bold, beautiful Nissan Magnite.
कोटक प्रोटेक्ट इंडिया 112 रुपए महीने में 5 लाख का लाइफ कवर और जब मर्जी 25 लाख तक का कवर ऐड ऑन करो। सोच के लिए है
कोटक प्रोटेक्ट इंडिया।
Hey guys, welcome back. You're still tuned into Business Lunch, and let's now get you an update on the COVID situation in India. So cases have spiked over the last week. India reported over 1,800 new cases in 24 hours for the second consecutive day. This is data according to the Union Health Ministry, and they're saying that active cases have now crossed the 10,000 mark, while 6 new deaths were also reported. This is over the last 24 hours. Now, the Union Health Secretary is also set to hold a meeting with senior officials and state health secretaries to review India's COVID preparedness. And amongst the states, it is Kerala, Maharashtra, Gujarat and Karnataka, as well as Tamil Nadu, which are reporting the maximum number of cases. So that is an update on the COVID situation as it stands right now, Nisha.
All right. So that's a COVID situation, but let's take it to an international development, and it's important. There are mass protests in Israel. So the backstory is that Israel's president has called on the government to halt the judicial overhaul after the prime minister of the country sacked the country's defense minister over his opposition to the plan of the prime minister on judicial overhaul. So sparking mass protests across the country on that, and CNBC's Hadley Campbell breaks down what has really transpired so far and the way forward.
This is the latest move by the Prime Minister that has driven Israelis to the streets. What we saw over the weekend was essentially the Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, getting sacked by the Prime Minister. That's because he pushed back on Mr. Netanyahu's planned reforms to the judiciary. Now, just remember that over the last 4 months, we have seen hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the street in protest of this very issue. These planned judicial reforms would essentially give the current government control over the appointment of judges. They'd also have control, essentially, over Supreme Supreme Court decisions, whether or not they would follow through with them or perhaps strike them down. And a lot of folks really looking at this as just another way for the government, for the Prime Minister himself, to gain more power here, because it would essentially make it much more difficult to call the leadership unfit. Now, one of the things that we've seen Mr. Netanyahu able to do over the last several decades is find a way to maintain power. The last time he came into office, he cobbled together a coalition of very, very right-wing and extreme conservatives, and that has given cause for pause for those sitting in Washington as well as European capitals. But it's also given folks out here in the UAE and others a raised eyebrow, if you will. Remember, of course, that Mr. Netanyahu was behind the Israeli side of things when we talked about the Abraham Accords just a couple of years ago. And what we've seen over the last several months is Mr. Netanyahu has been quite busy at home, not just with protests, but also with moves, frankly, to change some other things within his government, is a hands-off approach to the Abraham Accords themselves. You'll remember that there was a bilateral trade agreement signed a few years ago with the UAE specifically, saying that they wanted to reach some $10 billion of cross-investment in the next few years. And right now that number is sitting just at 2. So there are questions and concerns about how this could impact the Abraham Accords, but also how this could impact the ability of Israel to sign an agreement and a relationship and diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia. And as you know, I speak with Saudi officials quite often. It's been essentially a message of it's just a question of when that could actually happen. However, certainly what we've seen from Mr. Netanyahu over the last several months does raise questions about whether or not we're going to end up seeing that kind of an agreement.
All right, Hadley, thanks a lot for bringing us the latest. That is the big global story that we're tracking, the situation in Israel, and we will keep bringing you updates on this through the day as well. But for now, let's move on and bring you another special. We at News 18 Network are excited to announce the 3rd edition of Rising India, the most anticipated thought leadership forum in the country. And the theme for this year's edition is Real Heroes. And today we bring to you the story of Babita Rajput, a water warrior from Madhya Pradesh. Take a look at this story.
There is a saying that where there is a will, there is a way. And Babita Rajput from Agrota village, Chhatarpur district in Madhya Pradesh is a living example of this. Leading a group of women, she has found a way to solve a problem which has plagued them for ages.
हमारे गांव में पानी की अत्यधिक समस्या थी, जहां पर अगर हेडपंपों पर देखा जाए तो लाइन लगाकर लोग खड़े होते थे और सर पर 3 से 4 घड़े लेकर महिलाएं आती थीं। 2 सर पर, एक हाथ में, एक कमर पर, इस प्रकार से पानी भरती थी और रात के 4 बजे से पानी भरने का सिलसिला शुरू हो जाता था रात के 12 बजे तक।
A path was made by cutting about 107 meters of a mountain with the support of an NGO. And this phenomenal feat has resulted in a new wave of joy among the villagers. While earlier, all the hand pumps in the village had dried up, now they give ample water throughout the year. Also, the rainwater, which used to flow away through the mountains, has also started coming towards the villages, due to which the face of Agrota has completely transformed. However, achievers don't sit and bask in their achievements. They strive for more. Water is life, and leading the women of Agrota in their superhuman efforts, Babita Rajput has laid the foundation of a bright future for her village.
What an inspiring story there. On that note, we'll slip into a short breather on Business Lunch. But up next, don't go anywhere. We'll tell you how generative artificial intelligence like ChatGPT could impact the labor market, productivity, and global growth. Stay tuned.
ICICI Lombard B-Fit कवर से सारी मेडिसिन कैशलेस मिल गई।
कैशलेस मेडिसिन झूठ की वे खाद होती है मास्टर जी।
ICICI लोम्बार्ड हेल्थ एडवांटेज प्लस के साथ बिफिट कवर जो दे मेटर्निटी कवर, कैशलेस मेडिसिन जैसे फीचर्स। इट्स अनबिलीवेबल बट ट्रू।
हेलो किया, ओपन द सनरूफ प्लीज। सनरूफ ओपनिंग। Zoom zoom vroom vroom. Zoom zoom.
Open sunroof.
Zoom zoom vroom vroom. And a wee. Wee. Zoom
Designed so unique, everyone is inspired.
Kia, movement that inspires.
पंजाब बदल रहा है, नई रफ्तार से चल रहा है। खेतों में उम्मीद उगी है, खड़ी फसल गुनगुना रही है, गीत बदलाव के गा रही है, पिंड में भांगड़ा मचल रहा है, पंजाब बदल रहा है। मुश्किल से मिलते हैं मुश्किल में साथी, यहां तो हरदम कोई खड़ा है। हर मोहल्ले का अपना क्लिनिक, फ्री में इलाज चल रहा है, पंजाब बदल रहा है। मोहाली बस स्टेडियम नहीं, स्टार्टअप का भी हब है अब। टेक्नोलॉजी के इस शहर को सबने इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए चुना है। हौसला यूथ का उबल रहा है, पंजाब बदल रहा है। आने वाले सुनहरे कल की देखो तो तैयारी। सरकारी स्कूल में अब तो शिक्षा मिलती है म्यारी। करप्शन पर जीरो टॉलरेंस, बिजली का बिल भी जीरो है। इस बदलते पंजाब में अब तो आम आदमी हीरो है। किया संकल्प के बदलेंगे, मंजिल पे जाके दम लेंगे। सोच नई, अप्रोच नई, नई रफ्तार से चल रहा है, पंजाब बदल रहा है। तरक्की का एक साल पंजाब के साथ।
पापा प्लीज, तो मैं आपसे बड़ा चैंपियन बनकर ही घर लौटूंगा।
तू जब तक चैंपियन बनेगा ना, इसका रंग उतर जाएगा।
रंग उतरा?
ये रंग तो वैसे भी उतरने वाला नहीं था।
बारिश, धूप और धूल से आपके घर को सालों साल बचाए। ड्यूलक्स वेदरशील्ड पावर फ्लेक्स, घर का चैंपियन।
Welcome back to Business Lunch, and markets losing some ground, so keep an eye out on that 17,000 level breached below by Nifty 50. Now let's talk about something which is really topical. Now, generative artificial intelligence like ChatGPT and Lambda are presence felt in a number of industries. A Goldman Sachs report says that up to 2/3 of the current jobs are exposed to some degree of AI automation in the United States. Reema Tendulkar is right here with all the details. Reema.
Thanks so much for that. So here we're trying to present the impact of generative AI like ChatGPT on three key macros. The first one is the labor market, the second one is productivity, and the third one is global GDP, and this is as per a Goldman Sachs report. So let me start with some stats on the labor market. Now they're saying roughly 2/3 of the current jobs are exposed to some degree of AI automation in EU and in US. There are some professions where a large part of the work can be automated. For instance, 46% of the legal administrative work, or 44% of the legal work can be automated. But then there are some professions which are physically intensive, like construction or maintenance, or occupations for which a significant share of the worker's time, employee's time, is spent outdoors performing physical labor, and these cannot be automated by AI. Now, according to Goldman Sachs, generative AI could substitute about 25% of the current work in US and EU and expose the equivalent of 300 million full-time jobs to automation. Now that sounds a bit worrying, but here is the good news. Historically, worker displacement due to technology or automation has often been offset by the creation of new jobs and the emergence of new occupations. So generative AI, according to them, is likely to complement and not completely substitute the workforce. Now let's move on to the impact on the economy. The headline here is that Goldman Sachs estimates AI could eventually increase annual global GDP by 7% over the next 10 years. And this will be aided by an increase in productivity. So what will drive the productivity boom? One, significant labor cost savings. 2, there will be new jobs which will be created. And 3, higher productivity for the workers who've not been displaced, who've not lost their jobs. So generative AI, according to them, can raise annual US labor productivity growth by about 1.5% over a 10-year period. But the caveat here is the overall impact on the economy will depend on the capability and the adoption timeline. When does this become mainstream? And currently, both those parameters are a bit uncertain. Back to you.
Right, Reema, thanks a lot for taking us through those very, very interesting details and that report as well. But with that, we do need to wind down on this edition of Business Lunch. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. We have Mid-Cap Radar after this short break.